Hello, everyone, and welcome in to the Swarm Talk podcast. It's a bye week, and that's okay, though. We're going to talk a little bit of mailbag. We took some of your questions, and that's what we're going to talk about today. If you in the future want to be able to do these, I think we're going to start releasing some mailbag podcast on Tuesday. Every single Tuesday, we're going to be doing that. The best thing you can do is click the link down in the description below. If you're listening to this or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can join the Discord right there. We'll be taking some questions and obviously each and every single week. And we've got some good ones to get to today. My name is Bryce Koon. Thanks so much for tuning in to Swarm Talk, brought to you here by The Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Happy Thursday, everyone. We get ready to rock and roll. This episode was recorded prior to it coming out here on a Thursday night, but we got the questions in, and we're ready to rock and roll with some good questions. Shout out to the fans, to the Discord chat for doing a fantastic job of getting these in on such short notice. We'll be doing these every single Tuesday from here on out, though, as we get ready for the back half of the season. Once again, get your questions in. You can email us at thecrowdedbooth@gmail.com, or you join the Discord where we have engaging conversation all day long. It's a good time to talk college football, the Atlanta Braves, anything you want to, and especially Georgia Tech athletics. That's for anyone to join, but obviously Georgia Tech fans showing out in full force. We get the first question here from Miserable GT fan, and he's got kind of a three-parter, so I applaud you for this, Mr. Miserable GT fan. What's the likelihood that we win one of the three versus UNC, Clemson, and Georgia? Yeah, this is something that I think it's very interesting to see how these teams have started their season. Obviously, we'll start with the last game of the season. Georgia, has done what I think a nice job of bouncing back after a slow start, a big win against Kentucky where they flex their offensive muscles. That being said, I just hate that you have to play them later in the season. I feel like they're going to have a really, really strong identity of who they are. And so I would rank that as the least likely to win. You get to the other ones, and I think there's a case to be made for both. I mean, one, you've had UNC's number over the past couple of seasons, but you have a Clemson team that's probably a little bit worse than UNC, but you play them on the road. That being said, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I think you're more likely to beat Clemson than you are North Carolina. That might be unpopular, but I'm going to sit there with that. I think that Clemson has a lot of issues. I think they're still good defensively. Cade Klubnik I think, is going to still be a solid, good quarterback. But I think they are the worst team right now, and North Carolina seems to be building some momentum, some serious momentum. I don't know. I'm going to say Clemson, North Carolina, and Georgia, ranking those three. He also asked, does Scher retain the defensive coordinator role? It would make a lot of sense if he did, if he wants to, I think, for next season. And does Thacker stay on staff? This is a question where a lot of people were kind of in my comments about when Thacker was knocked down, when Thacker was demoted. And to that I say, in what job have you ever worked where you've gotten demoted, and then when let's say you're working a project, you get demoted off the project, and then you stay on? Like, that's not necessarily a really it's common idea to do. So I don't think Thacker stays on staff, which, you could talk about recruiting, all those different things. What does it hurt? What does it help? That being said, it would just be surprising to me to see Thacker stay on staff here. But, could it happen? I'm not saying it can't happen. To me, it just seems a little more unlikely in that sense. We get to Jonesy's question here, going through this mailbag on a Thursday. What are some of the biggest changes we could see Kevin Scher implement with the defense in the bye week? He didn't really have time to do anything in the 3 to 4 days. Yeah, Jonesy, I think it was a lot of emotional. I think it was a lot of riding the ship and getting back to the basics there, in the couple of days that he had before they made the trip down to Miami. Now with a bye week, now with heading into a Boston College game, I think you're going to have to see some creativity up front, whether it's, allowing, and continuing what they did in the Miami games, having the 300-plus pounders in the middle to really kind of beef up against the run. I think that's something they're going to continue to do. I think you're going to see a little bit more of Horace Lockett. I also think that you're going to see them eventually settle on some linebackers. Paul Moala, while, before the game against Miami, I wasn't super high on, had a good game, but can he be consistent at that position? We'll see. Trinius Tatum, Kyle Efford. I mean, who's going to be the other guys? Andre White, Braylon Oliver. All of these things I think are really interesting to kind of see who he settles on. So I think one, you're going to see them, really prioritize the front seven. And that's what Kevin Scherer, I think, being elevated is something they know they have to get better at. And so whether it's, personnel wise, whether it's scheme wise, I don't know if that's going to be a major difference. But I think personnel-wise, you're going to see Horace Lockett more integrated into this defense, especially up front in the middle, where they're going to want guys like Dowse, guys like Biggers, guys like Horace Lockett, that you can find some rotational pieces to really help you against a run defense that hasn't been all that great this season. We go to Justin Kingle here with his question. He goes, I'm kidding. He had a fantastic comment in the Discord. Do you think GT can sustain the turnovers on defense? Look, we can sit here and talk about, and I don't really have the energy to sit and argue back and forth about whether or not Georgia Tech deserved to win the football game. But what I can tell you is that the defense was in position when they needed to be to take advantage of Miami's mistakes. And that is something that we saw last year, being opportunistic. So far, when Brent Key teams win, they have been opportunistic. That is something they've been able to do. They haven't really flat out dominated anybody. You could look at the Wake Forest game, maybe there, but you date back to the Pitt game. You look back at the North Carolina game, and you look at this past one against Miami. They've been opportunistic when they have been able to take advantage of opportunities. They've won. Now that is a kind of general statement about college football, but I think also. And it can't be the number one thing. And for me, that's the danger that you roll into. If it's the only way that they're able to win football games, that they're not necessarily favored in, yeah, you have to be able to do that. Like everyone's going to talk about the fact that turnovers have to be made. You have to capitalize on those opportunities. Although you got to play better offense. You've got to be more consistent offensively. So I think that yes, can they be in better position? Maybe that's part of what Kevin Scherer to take advantage. Kevin Scherer is doing so that they can take better advantage of the opportunities when they present themselves. I just don't want to be so reliant on it. That's the only way you can win a football game. So that's kind of where I sit in that, Justin. Do I think they can sustain it? We'll see. I mean, they were able to do it over the course of a couple games last year. But asking a defense, this is where I get into this. Asking a defense to just be prone to getting turnovers all the time and forcing turnovers instead of necessarily having a group that can sit there and say, you know what, you don't have to have the pressure on you all the time to do that. That's a dangerous game to play. Now, if you combine that with a couple other factors, it's completely fine. But if it's just the sole factor, that's where I have an issue with it. So we'll see. Maxwell in here, where's the Haynes King respect? Nobody outside of GT fans respects him. Haynes or Maxwell, I've seen a couple people say that Haynes has done really well. We have a group of 24/7 writers that talks about some specific things. Excuse me on that. Let me pause. So Maxwell says, where is the Haynes King respect? Nobody outside the Georgia Tech fan base really respects him. It's really interesting you say that because I don't know if it's maybe he's been as public as it needs to be, but kind of where I sit in the sense of this is Haynes King has done exactly what Georgia Tech needed him to do. They've provided a little bit of stability, and even in a game, and this is where I think you have to give the credit, where he obviously didn't have his best day against Miami, he kept battling. He kept fighting, and he was able to get you in a position to win that game there at the end. So, I think at Haynes King, whether it's nationally, if you're going to see the respect, I mean, I think I'll say this. We have a 24/7 sports group that we talk about some things with, and the Texas A&M folks were like, hey, they knew I'd covered Tech, and they said, look, Haynes King's been really nice over there for them. It's been exactly, and, they're happy to see that. King was, really well liked by the media over there, and so I think a lot of people, especially in that state of Texas where he, played and everything, are excited to see what he's doing. That being said, I think you're going to see it more from that angle as former Aggie quarterback having success, rather than saying Georgia Tech, might have found something because one, the media scrum is not going to be there for Georgia Tech right now. So it's going to be looked at more as former Aggie quarterback having success rather than Georgia Tech has found success with Haynes King. That's just the way the national media views, I think, what Georgia Tech is currently in their situation. We go to the next question here. Tobias 13. Is the offense going to take a step forward to the positives we saw early on, or are we seeing our aggression towards the mean? Are we going to be more like we were in the Miami and Bowling Green game, or, and this part of the question got cut off because of character limit. He said, or maybe that, game against game against Louisville, the second quarter against Louisville. I think it's just a part of the growth process of this offense as a whole. It's the growth process of Buster Faulkner as an OC calling plays for the first time in a long time and finding the consistency, finding the balance, finding some of these weapons. They thought Eric Singleton was going to be a big part of the offense, but I think everyone's lying to you if they thought that Eric Singleton was going to be this good, coming into, the week 6, week 7 that we're entering now. So, that being said, I think that you're seeing regression maybe, I don't want to say towards the mean. I mean, I think this can be a good offense, but you're going to, when you shoot yourself in the foot like you did against Miami and you play a good defense like you've played a couple times this year, they sometimes they win the battles. And so I think this is a good offense. Like, I don't think it's bad. It's definitely the best that we've seen since the transition. But I think that overall, this offense has done a pretty good job of keeping the team in games and doing their job. So I would say it's going to stay about par for the course, essentially. I don't think you're going to be as bad as you were in Bowling Green the rest of the way, because I often sit in this. You're not as good as you think you are, and you're probably not as bad as you think you are. So it's not really ever as good as you think it is, and it's probably not ever as bad as you think it is. So if you had me somewhere in between of Ole Miss, Louisville, and Bowling Green, Miami, I think Wake Forest is where you could look to find, what this offense can really be. And I think that's kind of was the median on what they were able to do in between all of those games, especially kind of explosiveness wise as well. And look, I think it's going to help when you get a couple of these guys healthy as well. Tobias comes back with another question. Because it's Georgia Tech, we will probably win a game we shouldn't and lose a game we shouldn't of the next 6. If you had to place money, who do we beat and who do we lose to? I mentioned this earlier. Out of the 3 games, there's 6 games remaining. Out of the 3 games remaining, I think Clemson's the most likely, and I might have talked myself out of that here on the show. I think that you beat North Carolina. You could, that's the most likely team that you could probably beat. And I have officially talked myself out of that earlier question and prediction. That being said, I do think that it's an option for you going forward that you win that one. And, losing one is going to be very interesting because I don't know if you're going to be favored against Syracuse. I could see you losing that game. And I think that it wouldn't necessarily surprise a lot of people outside of the fan base that you lost that game just because of the veteran quarterback player of Garrett Schrader, Dino Babers being a good coach, and all things like that considered. The game that scares me is Virginia, because I don't think Virginia is very, very good, but Tech has had a tough time up in Charlottesville in years past. It's not been a pretty place for them to go play. So if we're saying from the fans' perspective here, what is the one game that you should win and the one game that you should lose, but you flip-flop those? I think it would be, Clemson, North Carolina, the game that you should lose that you win. And I think it's Virginia, the game that you should definitely handily win that you go in there and lose. That would kind of be where I kind of sit on that. Jonesy here with a question. Appreciate you. What do you think, BK? And that throws me off. My name's Bryce Koon. I cover LSU, so Brian Kelly. But then also we have Brent Key. What do you think BK needs to focus? Needs to be in the transfer portal this offseason. Biggest thing for me is going to recruit your own roster. I'm going to get in that too a little bit. I think that you've just got to grow. Like you've got to be able to. I'd like to see them add some DBs, maybe some options if you're going to play them, which they really haven't even necessarily done this year. Maybe try to find some linebacker help, some defensive line help. But I think offensively, maybe a veteran offensive lineman like you got Scaglione. That's been a nice addition. Maybe you find another option like that can be a swing guy, can be a guy that can fill in a pinch. But overall, I mean, I think I really like where this offense is headed. So I think it's more about recruiting your own roster back and growing and developing the guys that are in-house. That's kind of where I'll sit with that. The Rude Raccoon. Do you think the flashes in Buster Faulkner's offense have a chance to be sustainable? If so, what do you think is needed to gain sustainability? Play calling once, that was something we talked about on the live show last Saturday night after the win with a caller from Rome, Georgia. They did a fantastic job. So do you think that the flashes, look, when it comes to the flashes, they're hurting missing Chase Lane. It's a favorite target. It's a comfortable target for Haynes King. So not having Chase Lane, I think, has hurt this offense a little bit. When he gets back, I think you're going to see some more explosiveness. That being said, I think it's personnel. I think you've got to continue to let these guys grow. You got to continue to get the right guys in there and the right guys reps. We've seen that. Eric Singleton, the guy that didn't have a ton of reps in week 1, is now one of the more focal points of this entire team in offense now heading into week 7 here in the bye week. That being said, I think it's also on the growth of Buster Faulkner as a play caller. I mean, he hasn't done this in quite some time. Obviously, it's Southern Miss, who's at Arkansas State. That being said, you have to grow and learn and go along with the waves and the punches that you do growing in this. So as much as the players are going to have growing pains, I also do think that Buster Faulkner is going to learn this roster more and more, because you can only see the results of it really in games. So you've got 12 opportunities a year to really see that. Some teams get more than others. But for Tech right now, you're going to have 12 opportunities. You hope to get, a 13th opportunity. You're going to see how these guys respond in game. You can tell a lot from practice, but I think Buster Faulkner is starting to see what these guys are really made of when the lights come on in the stadium. That's going to be something that's very, very interesting. Maxwell comes back with another question. If we hit 6 wins this regular season and are able to make and win a bowl game, how much further can we expect Georgia Tech to take off in 2024? This is a great point, and I think it's a great question. If Georgia Tech can get to a bowl game, let's say they go 6-6, okay, and they win a bowl game, they go 7-6, it changes everything for this team. I want folks to understand that are inside the fan base, and sometimes it's hard for all of us to see when you're in the midst of something and you're inside and you're invested in it. The outside perception of Georgia Tech is that not a lot of people really care. So if you can give them something to care about, and that goes along with the donors and it goes along with a lot of other people that are affiliated with the program or might not have any affiliation with the program, it's going to help you. It's going to help in recruiting. You're going to be able to get into the homes of some of these kids that maybe the doors were locked previously. You're going to be able to get further along in the process with them as well. So I think that, how much further can we expect Georgia Tech to take off in 24? It builds confidence, because now this means you win 3 more games, you win 4 more games by winning a bowl game. You've changed everything in the midst of a year in Brent Key. Like, I think it'd be absolutely, huge. I don't think it's enough because of certain other teams to maybe win Coach of the Year, but I think Coach Brent Key would have to be obviously in the running for that, taking a team that had won, so many games and what was it, 13 games in 4 years and being able to win 7 in a bowl game. Like, that's massive progress in an ACC that's not all that super competitive. So it would set you up for 2024 of saying, okay, can we make another leap, or are we going to continue to establish ourselves at this level? So there's a lot of good things, only good things, Maxwell, that I think come out of, getting that 6 wins in the regular season and then winning a bowl game as well. Maxwell comes back with another one. A lot of repeat offenders, I guess we'll call them, here in the questions in the mailbag. Piggybacking off that earlier Faulkner question, are Buster's questionable calls due to more to him being a new OC or more due to him not having the talent yet that he needs to do what he wants? I think part of it, I think it's a little bit of both. I think they've got some talent, but I also do think that it's part of him being kind of that new OC, getting back into the swing of things of calling plays, which he had a heavy input, obviously, in when he was at Athens, but he's not the ultimate decision maker. And so that being said, now being the guy that's going to be able to dial up some of these plays, I've talked a lot about this. I want to see improved in-game flow management, calling of the plays on the offensive side of the football. I think that's something that we could really hope for a growth pattern in this second half of the season. So that's where I'll leave it with that. Before we get into the back half of these questions, make sure you check out Section 103, a fantastic brand that has some of the best gear. You're going to want to use code Crowded Booth for 10% off your first order. It's some of the best gear supporting your Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. They do a great job over there, and they are the presenting sponsor of this show here. Swarm Talk, brought to you by the Crowded Booth. Let's get to a couple more of the questions here. And as we roll, I think I hit a repeat there, so let's delete that one. We got my man Justin. Broader question: what can Tech do to keep its playmakers on the team? Now, this was in effect to a question that was posted in the Discord, and I decided to kind of put it all together. Was you have to re-recruit your roster. You have to be able to every single offseason. And look, the people that, want to just scream at the clouds about where college football is nowadays, you might not like it, but this is what it is. And I'm not saying that I approve of it. It just is what it is. every single offseason, not only do you have to recruit the high school ranks, not only do you have to recruit the transfer portal, you have to recruit your own roster year in and year out. So it's, specifically someone asked a question about a guy like Eric Singleton. I made the comment on social media about it, and fans just got up in arms. First off, acting like I was advocating or bending the ear of Lane Kiffin, which is absolutely asinine. But if you don't think that teams have dedicated analysts, dedicated, intern staffs to breaking down the game film of not only the guys they've played, i.e., Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss watching Eric Singleton, but other guys as well that might be potentially interested in moving up a rung, which that would be a move up. You're kidding yourself. Like that. That's exactly what is happening, and we know that is happening in the college ranks. So that being said, you have to re-recruit your roster. You have to invest kind of in the NIL. You have to be able to offer these kids some packages that move the needle. It just is what it is. It's not the good old days of relationships definitely matter. I don't want to discredit what relationships do and what some of the relationships these kids have built with staff members does. But that being said, it's a component, and to act like it's not a component just because you're Georgia Tech and you offer a great education, for me, that's just it's not a great mentality to have when it comes to the transfer portal. So that's where I sit with that. How badly is Georgia Tech football underfunded? I don't know the specific numbers, but I know that this is something they're still continuing to try to work out of a deficit. So, great question here, C. Andrew K. I don't want to, speak out of turn in the sense of not knowing the specific numbers. I can only tell you what I know on the athletics front is that they have a ways to go to be able to compete with teams that they're maybe even with on the field. Dr. Bob had put this over in the Discord. Another great reason for you to tune into the Discord, but pretty much saying that this is something where, look, Duke has been quietly building up facilities, quietly doing some things. Georgia Tech needs to kind of get to that spot. So where are they financially? I think they still have a ways to go when it comes to NIL packages and stuff that I know about. It's not comparable right now. And so it's leaning heavily on those relationships like we talked about in that previous question. And how sustainable is that? As college football continues to evolve, and if we all think we're going where we're going with this sport, it's something that's got to be turned around, I think, very fast. And I think J-Bat's doing a good job of that. He understands the landscape. The problem for me in this, and I wanted to, talk about this, is when people donate their money to NIL funds, when you go out and fundraise this, a lot of these business people, they think of ROI. What's my return on investment? You're not going to make them happy by going 6-6 and 7-5. So that's going to be the biggest challenge for Georgia Tech when you talk about getting funding for this, is what is the ROI on this football product? And I think Brent Key is, he's in a situation where, look, I know the back half of Andrew K's question, talked about Paul Johnson and then Jeff Collins, saying that he didn't feel like he was funded properly. But when you lose, not in Johnson's case, but in Collins' case, it's harder to get that money. The initial investment, I don't think, is very hard. The initial numbers, and everyone was excited about in the offseason about Brent Key's our head coach. Selling Brent Key before he had coached a game as the full-time head coach was never going to be the hardest part of this process. The hardest part of this process is going to be if you go 5-7 this year or 4-8, because now people don't see the ROI. And look, it's already a fan base that I think is very apathetic, especially when it comes to some of the money folks. So I think it's going to be something very interesting to monitor and kind of go. And I think it also feeds into the funding as well, in the sense of Paul Johnson complained for years about the fact that some of the facilities weren't up to par. I think it's something they're going to have to continue to get that to a point. And I will say this: you want to take a look at the basketball side of things. Before Damon Stoudemire accepted the job, he had to be shown this is how we're going to do this from a funding standpoint, because he wouldn't take the job otherwise. So I would say, if I'm a Tech fan, like, that's encouraging in the sense of he took that job on the basketball side of things. Now football, we'll see. I think going back up to Maxwell's thing, with the 6 wins thing, it's going to be something very interesting to monitor. If you win, then more money will come. And it's kind of the chicken and egg question. It's just where Tech is at this point. So I think that's where we're at with that. A couple more questions before we roll out of here for the evening. Tobias 13, is there any interest by other teams to get King to transfer? What is the likelihood Pyron transfers? And if he transfers, where does he go? I'm going to break this up into two different parts. The eligibility and the ability to transfer has just constantly changed over the past couple of years, and the cultural landscape has gotten so different. It is to my understanding that Haynes King can only transfer if he graduates again and then transfers as a graduate transfer. He cannot utilize the transfer and play immediately again due to him already using that one-time free transfer. So I don't think you're going to see King transfer after this year. That would blow me away unless I'm understanding those rules incorrectly, which I could be corrected on that. The next part of this is, what is the likelihood of Pyron transferring, and if Pyron does transfer? I'm sure that this part of the question will get cut up and sent to folks as well. That'll be absolutely hilarious. I will say this just from a personal opinion. Once again, personal opinion that folks are allowed to have about people in the public sphere. And if you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't be in the public sphere. That being said, the likelihood that Pyron transfers, I mean, you have to kind of ask yourself, with the years of eligibility remaining under Haynes King, if he continues to progress, what is the payoff for Pyron to stay? So, I don't know. One program I've always kind of felt like would be really cool for him to go to, and there's no steam to this. It would just be one. It'd be UAB for me. Going back and working with a guy like Trent Dilfer, right there in his hometown, essentially over there in Birmingham. I think that would make a lot of sense. But once again, like I said, I have no clue. This is completely personal opinion, which I don't. If Haynes King finishes this year off really strong, and you feel like you can get more out of him next year, you have to start to beg the question of, I think that Pyron and them would have to look at certain things. I mean, I will say this: you would be crazy not to. Like if King finishes good this year out well, and the way he's played up until this point, and he stays healthy, you kind of be crazy if you didn't at least explore the options or see what was out there if you're Zach Pyron. Because look, I mean, now more than ever, kids need to get on the field. They need to be able to perform as soon as possible to be able to put that tape in the hands of NFL scouts. That being said, both of these guys, I think, coming into their college careers had NFL potential. And if you kind of, waffle too long behind somebody, you kind of start to lose the luster and become a little of a forgotten commodity. So I think that, just personal opinion, we could see him transfer. And then, like, if he does transfer, where does he go? UAB for me was like the one school that I just like kept popping up in my mind, getting back home, playing for a program that's now in the American Conference, solid group of 5 program. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. John Freeman, I appreciate you tuning in, John. Do you see Coach Kevin Scherer making any major changes to the defense now that he has 2 weeks prepared for BC? Address this a little bit. I think it's going to be, John, that you're going to see them get, I'll say, beefier up the middle. I think you're going to see more Horace Lockett. Hopefully you're going to see them settle on 2 guys in the linebacker position. But I think Scherer is going to leave the back end necessarily to, the guys back there. And I think he's going to be more focused on up front with a guy like Marco Coleman and figuring out how can we generate the most creative pass rush to be able to get home on some of the more talented quarterbacks that we're going to face. They still have, obviously, Cade Klubnik to play. They've got Drake May to play. They've got Carson Beck to play. Garrett Schrader, who's a mobile guy for Syracuse. That's 4 out of your next 6 opponents, that guys that could hurt you from the quarterback position. So how can you disrupt them and not have to rely on a secondary that hasn't been fantastic at times? And then I think also you're going to see them with a little more emphasis on playing physical and being better tacklers. It seems like Scherer kind of harped on that, Brent Key's comments the past week heading into Miami. So I think he's, in this bye week, they probably really worked on that, to be able to form tackle, staying engaged, I will also say staying, deliberate in the way that you play this game, and not, freelancing too much. So we'll see that as well. Final question of tonight's show. It comes from Crowded Booth intern Dr. Bob. How do we use outstanding freshman play to capitalize on recruiting and keeping guys out of the portal? Dr. Bob was referencing here, and I had to get a clarification on this question. Ethan McKinney starting on the offensive line, and then obviously Eric Singleton. This is the biggest part for me right here, okay? The way you capitalize in recruiting is Now kids say, well, there's a chance to play. You know what I mean? Like, there's a chance to play, and from year one, it doesn't matter, what year you are, you can go in there and play. Keeping guys out of the portal, now you tell McKinney, you tell, Eric Singleton, yeah, you can go somewhere else and be maybe the number 2, number 3 guy, but you come here, you can be the face of this. You can be the face of this remodel. I will caution this, and I was able to, dig into this after the Bowling Green game. It's going to be interesting to me to monitor and watch how this affects in recruiting, because the talk for the past 5 seasons is come be a part of this rebuild, come be a part of the rebrand, the birth of a new Georgia Tech. And that plays all in well, but if you don't win, the timer's eventually going to run out on that. And then the lure of playing early as a freshman is also combined with, well, I don't want to go there and lose because they haven't shown anything. So it goes back to my point of you've got to be able to win. So if they can, this is the perfect scenario to me. If you can get to 6-6, if you can go win a bowl game and you're able to keep these freshmen, I think it opens the door for a pretty profitable, and it opens a pretty big door for the success of this program going into 2024. That is a Mailbag podcast brought to you here on a Thursday evening, recorded earlier in the day, but hey, we got it over to you. We're going to be doing these on Tuesdays going forward. It's going to be very, very fun to watch and see how next week unfolds. Enjoy the bye week. You know what? Hop on the couch, go outside, get a nice cookout. The weather's great, especially down here in Louisiana. I know it's not been okay in Georgia, but hey, the temperature's a little bit cooler. Enjoy this weekend of college football, and we'll catch you back again on Sunday Night Live to talk about what Georgia Tech has to go here. That'll be 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern. Thanks so much for tuning in, and our presenting sponsor over there at Section 103, the best place to get that Georgia Tech gear. Make sure you use code Crowded Booth for 10% off your order, and tell them Bryce sent you. We'll catch you next time here on Swarm Talk.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. Coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.